My name is Nadia, I'm 31, and 3 weeks ago at my cousin's engagement party in Mississauga, with 140 people watching, my mother took the mic during the toasts and said the only thing I'd ever finished was a bag of chips. She laughed when she said it. So did half the room. I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I sat there at the table near the kitchen doors, the one with the second cousins, and my uncle's business partner, who kept checking his phone, and I made a decision so quiet, I almost didn't notice I'd made it. But to understand why that moment landed the way it did, you have to go back, because this didn't start at an engagement party. It started in a hospital hallway in Hamilton, Ontario, 20 years ago, when I was 11, and my father told me he was counting on me. We were the Petrov family, not rich, but steady. My grandfather had come from Bulgaria in the 70s, and started a small auto body shop on Barton Street. With 2 bays and a tow truck he financed himself. By the time I was born, my dad, Mihail, ran the place, and we lived in a modest brick semi off Mohawk Road, the kind with a chain-link fence and an above-ground pool my dad put up every June, and took down every September like clockwork. We went to the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, twice a month. My mom, Tanya, kept a freezer full of banitsa and never let anyone leave the house hungry. She was warm to almost everyone. Just not, in any sustained way, to me. There was a particular gentleness she saved for my younger brother Pavel, 3 years behind me, that never quite made it in my direction. Nothing cruel. Nothing you could point to and call abuse. Just a temperature difference you could feel, if you stood close enough. Pavel was good at hockey. Not elite, but good enough that by the time he was 9 he was on a AAA team, and the entire household calendar reorganized itself around tournament weekends. My dad coached part of one season. My mom drove 4 hours to London, Ontario for a Pee-wee tournament and came back glowing for a week. I brought home report cards with nothing but A's and nobody asked to see them. When I was 14, my dad had a stroke. A mild one, the doctor said, but it scared all of us, and it scared the business more than it scared him. The shop had 2 slow years right after, customers drifting to bigger chains, with online booking, and by the time I was finishing high school, money was, as my dad put it, tight in a way that wasn't going away on its own. I had a partial entrance scholarship to McMaster for kinesiology. I needed about $9,000 a year on top of that for residence and the rest. My father sat me down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday night. He had his hands folded the way he did when something was hard for him to say. Nadia Moy, he said. He always called me that, my little one, even when I was taller than him. He told me they couldn't make the gap work. Not that year. Maybe things would turn around. Maybe I should start at Mohawk College and transfer in after 2 years. I looked at my mom. She was wiping down a counter that was already clean. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't learn for another 14 years, was that 6 weeks earlier, my parents had co-signed a loan for $19,000, so Pavel could join a spring hockey academy in Burlington. The kind with private skills coaches, and a strength trainer and ice time billed by the hour. I enrolled at Mohawk. I told myself it was temporary. It mostly wasn't. The week after I turned 19, I moved to Toronto with $1,100, 2 suitcases, and a job lined up answering phones at a property management office near Eglinton. I made $16 an hour. My apartment was a basement unit in the East End that flooded a little every spring and had one window at sidewalk level where you could watch people's shoes go by. I called home most weekends at first, then every other week. Then almost never, because every call ended in the same 2 places. My mom asking when I was going to figure out a real plan, and my dad mentioning, gently proudly, how Pavel's team had done at provincials. I started taking every free certification I could find. Property management licensing through a continuing ed program, bookkeeping through a community center course that met on Thursday nights. I read everything I could about real estate investment, taught myself to read a rent roll and a cap rate from a forum full of landlords, twice my age. I got my registration to manage properties at 22. By 24, I was overseeing a portfolio of 35 units for a small independent firm run by a woman named Anne Pham. Anne was the first adult since my dad's hospital bed version of himself, who told me I had something real. You don't just manage units, she said once, after I'd untangled a messy lease dispute on my own. You think like you own the building, so go own one. So I did. At 27 I took $18,000 in savings, every cent I had, and incorporated Northbridge Property Group, just me. A laptop, and a desk I rented by the month in a co-working space on Queen Street East. I kept my own name off everything public. No LinkedIn with my face on it, no press. All contracts running through the company and my lawyer, a careful, unhurried woman named Priscilla Owusu. People ask why's the secrecy, because I knew exactly how my family operated. If they found out I was building something, they'd find a way to attach themselves to it. Or undercut it, or both. I'd watched it happen to my father's confidence for 2 decades. I wasn't handing them the chance to do it to mine. By 30, Northbridge managed 290 residential units and a handful of small commercial spaces across the Greater Toronto Area. Annual revenue had crossed $1.7 million. I had 6 employees, a real office with a view of nothing special, and a couch I'd actually chosen myself. And a 1-bedroom condo near the waterfront with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the lake. I paid my own way for everything. I asked nobody for anything. Here's the part that still makes me go quiet for a second. A year and a half ago, Pavel, who'd torn his ACL at 20 and never made it past junior hockey, who'd cycled through 2 sales jobs and a short stint selling insurance, got engaged to a woman named Brielle from Oakville. Brielle's parents were small-scale investors, and they needed a property manager for a 4-plex they'd just bought in Leslieville, someone they could trust. Pavel didn't know, it was me. Northbridge's listing only showed a general inquiry email, and Priscilla's name as the point of contact. I took the account myself. We handled leasing, maintenance, rent collection, everything. And the Renauds, Brielle's parents, told everyone who'd listened that they'd never had a better property manager. They referred us 2 more clients within the year. At Thanksgiving, Pavel told my mom that some company called Northbridge was doing an incredible job on the Renauds building. My mom apparently said, "See, that's what happens when you have good instincts, finding the right people." I found this out from my Aunt Lena, my dad's sister, who texts me things she thinks I should know because, in her words, somebody in this family has to. Lena was the one who called me 2 days before the engagement party and said, "Nadia, I have to tell you something. Your mother's been telling people you've been struggling, that you had some kind of episode after you and that guy broke up." That guy was Theo, someone I dated for 8 months 2 years earlier. My mother had apparently decided his absence explained my entire adult life ever since. I told Lena I'd be fine. I went to the party because Pavel asked me to, and because some small, stubborn part of me still believed families could surprise you. I was right, just not how I'd hoped. It was held at a banquet hall off Hurontario in Mississauga, the kind that does both weddings and quinceañeras depending on the weekend. White tablecloths, centerpieces with eucalyptus, a DJ setting up near the dance floor. I wore a deep burgundy dress I'd bought for myself with my own money, simple, well-cut, and my grandmother's gold cross on a chain, the one piece of hers I had left. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who had built something real. My mother found me near the bar during the cocktail hour. She looked me over the way someone checks a used car they're not planning to buy. "You look tired," she said. "Are you eating properly?" I told her I was great. Pavel hugged me, genuinely, I think. He's not unkind, my brother. He's just been raised to grow toward one source of light his whole life, the way a plant does without meaning anything by it. Dinner went fine. Then the toast started. Brielle's father went first, then her maid of honor, then my mother stood up before anyone had even handed her the mic, which tells you she'd planned it. She talked about Pavel, his resilience, his charm, how he'd overcome setbacks. The setback being, as far as anyone could tell, a torn knee ligament and a pivot into insurance sales. She made it sound heroic. Then she looked at me. "My daughter Nadia is here tonight too," she said, and the room turned to look. Nadia's always done things her own way. She smiled that smile. No real career to speak of. Still kind of finding her footing. A small laugh. 31 and still figuring it out. "We love her anyway." A few people laughed, the nervous kind. The kind that means people know it's wrong, but don't want to be the only one sitting still. I was very still. I counted to 5. Then I stood up, walked to the mic stand the DJ had left by the dance floor, and picked it up. The room went quiet on its own. I'd like to say something. My voice didn't shake. I want that on the record. It did not shake. "Congratulations, Pavel. I mean that." I looked at him. He looked terrified already. And to everyone here, I want to be honest. Because my mom just told you I'm still finding my footing. So let me tell you where I found it. I turned to her. "Mom. The property management company that's been handling the Renauds building in Leslieville, the one Pavel's been bragging about for a year, that's mine. I built it. I own it. We managed close to 300 units and brought in over $1.5 million last year." The room didn't make a sound. "I didn't go to McMaster because you told me there wasn't money. There was money. You spent it on a hockey academy." I kept my voice level. "I'm not saying that to hurt anyone tonight. I'm saying it because I'm tired of being the family's cautionary tale when I'm the opposite of one." I set the mic down on the nearest table, picked up my clutch, and walked out. My heels on that hall's tile floor were the only sound in the room. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time after, not crying, just breathing. The way you breathe after finally getting something out of your chest that's been sitting there for years. If you've ever been the family punchline, the one they describe as still figuring it out while your bank account quietly tells a different story. I want you to know, I see you. If you've ever sat at the table near the kitchen doors because someone needed you smaller so they could feel bigger, I see you too. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to say the truth out loud in a room full of people who'd already agreed on a lie? I read every single one. Now back to what happened, because the engagement party wasn't actually the end of it. 2 days later my phone rang. Aunt Lena again. "She's telling people you had a breakdown. that the stress of your little business got to you and you made a scene. I wasn't surprised. But then Lena said something else. Nadia, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. Your grandmother, your Baba, she left you something before she passed. Your mother intercepted the letter from the lawyer's office. I went cold. My grandmother, Baba Vela, had died when I was 23. I'd been told her estate was split evenly between her 2 children, and that there was nothing separate for the grandkids. I'd never had reason to question it. Lena told me Baba Vela had specifically left me $26,000, designated for education or starting a business. My mother had signed for the letter, told the estate lawyer I'd declined the funds, and moved the money into a joint account she controlled. I called Priscilla that afternoon. It took her 3 weeks and 1 formal letter from her office to recover $23,400, the original amount minus a portion that had already been spent. The lawyer's records intact enough to trace the rest. My mother hadn't covered her tracks as carefully as she thought. I didn't take her to court. I didn't need to. I donated the full amount to a first-generation student bursary at Mohawk College, in Baba Vela's name. 6 weeks after the party, Pavel called me. He'd found out about Northbridge, all of it, through Brielle's parents putting the pieces together. He was quiet on the phone for a long time. I didn't know, he finally said. I know you didn't. I don't even know what she's been doing. I know, Pavel. We talked for almost 2 hours. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. He told me he wished he'd asked more questions growing up instead of just accepting how things were divided. We're still figuring out what our relationship looks like now. It's careful, but it's real, which is more than it's ever been. My mother hasn't reached out to me directly. Through Pavel, I've heard she's telling people the whole thing at the party was staged. That I planned it for attention. Maybe it was cruel to do it that way, in front of a room full of people. I've turned that over more than once. But here's what I know. I spent 20 years trying to correct her version of me quietly, through grades and work and patience and hope, and it never once worked. Sometimes quiet doesn't reach people. Sometimes the truth has to be said loud enough that it can't be laughed off. Today, Northbridge has 11 employees, and just signed our biggest contract yet, managing a new mixed-use building going up near the distillery district. I keep a small photo of Baba Vela on my desk, her hands folded in her lap the way my dad still folds his when something matters to him. I bring her white peonies when I visit, because she always grew them along her back fence in Hamilton, no matter how short the summer was. I did it, Baba. I kept going. I'm not angry at my family, not most days. Anger is heavy, and I carried other people's weight for long enough. I put it down. What I have instead is clarity, about what I built, about what I'm worth, about who gets close to me, and who gets kept at a careful, respectful distance. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're just the plain acknowledgement that you matter enough to protect. If you're watching this from a family that made you feel like a footnote in your own story, hear me. You were never the footnote. You were the whole chapter they didn't bother reading.